Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fourth edition of the Skift Meetings Backstage Briefing webinar series. With me are two special guests today, Liz here on my left, I think, or your left, if you're looking at this, and Sven Boelhouwer from Experience Experts, Liz Lathan from Ichi. Sven Boelhouwer, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you. I know we're going to have a super interesting conversation.
Yay!
Before we get started, just wanted to share a few things about Skift Meetings and what we are doing overall. I think if you're on the webinar, you probably are familiar with some of the stuff that we're doing, but in case you don't know, we do insights reports, editorial reports on a quarterly or more than quarterly basis. The last few are on the screen there if you want to download any of them. They're all free to download, so have a look at those. There's an incentive travel report, a what's new report with 135 different hotels and venues for you to explore that are all new, and an event tech almanac. That's just a small selection of the last few reports that we did. We also have a few live events, and Liz will be seeing you there in a few days, in less than 2 weeks, in New York City on September the 15th. The Skift Meetings Forum, it's our flagship event. So if you happen to be in New York on September the 15th, or if you want to be in New York on September the 15th, highly recommend, of course, joining the flagship event for Skift Meetings Forum.
And it's the day before my birthday, so Miguel's going to have a cake for me, right?
All right, that is news for me. So we'll have to work on that. Production team, copy that. Just wanted to highlight one of the cool things that we're doing. We're doing a number of experiments in event design, etc. And I wanted to highlight this that we're doing, which is called the keynote listeners. So we've invited 8 keynote listeners. One of them is, of course, Liz, who you'll recognize as the first one listed here. But they're all heads of communities and associations in the events and meetings industry. And we've asked them not to be keynote speakers, if you notice, which I think a lot of them are accustomed to being keynote speakers, but we've asked them to be keynote listeners. And what that means is we've asked them to come, participate, join the event, be part of the happening, and then at the end of the day, really share their experience, share their highlights, and tell us what they're going to do about what they heard. And I think this is going to be a really interesting experiment, and I'm looking forward to one of the experiments that we're running live at the Skift Meeting Forum. One more event to tell you about. If you're planning to head to IMEX America, we are running a afternoon innovation lab, all focused on AI. We have 100 places. We're close to selling out. So if you're thinking about heading to IMEX America, this is on the Monday, the Smart Monday before the show opens. Do join us for the AI Innovation Lab. And of course, one last thing, the Skift Meetings Stand Up, which is our twice weekly newsletter on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So look out for another edition tomorrow morning. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the key place that you're really going to learn about everything that we do, including our editorial coverage, etc. But of course, our events as well. And I know, yes, here we are. So let's talk a little bit about why Liz and Sven are joining me today. I see that a lot of people are putting where they're joining from in the comments, so I love that. So please keep doing that. We have Monique from Boston, Sylvia from Vancouver, we have Devin. I know Devin. Hello, Devin. A lot of different people coming from around the world. Liz is in Texas, in Austin, Texas, so that is great. Always nice to see we have a very global audience. But why did I invite Liz and Sven to join us today? We're talking about event design, and really, I think they are two real experts in event design. I'm going to share a little bit of what I know about both of them, and hopefully not embarrass them too much, but hopefully this is kind of interesting. So Liz has a real corporate background with Dell and IBM, and then has been involved in startups for a few years. Hot Takimazo, the Community Factory, and now Club Ichi, which is sort of part of the Community Factory, a community for B2B event marketers. And one of the things that she's really focused on is this idea of spontaneous think tanks. And we're going to talk about more of that later. But Liz, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Sven, I've also known Sven for a number of years. He has his own company called Nodesk and is the co-founder of a company called Experience Experts. And Sven is a proficient jack of all trades. You're going to find Sven at a C-level strategy meeting talking about event strategy. You're going to find him behind the stage with headphones on doing a production, or you're going to find him at IMEX pouring a perfect glass of Heineken for everybody there. Sven really does everything with ease. And I have a lot of respect for Sven's work and, of course, for Liz's work. So I've invited them both here because they kind of embody event design for me in some ways. I am a big fan of the topic of event design, the idea of really thinking about how you're creating experiences for people. And when I thought about this topic, I really wanted to come up with some concepts that were fascinating and really kind of push the boundary a little bit. And Sven and Liz were both people involved in creating concepts that I think are really interesting. And I want to start with those concepts and then move on. I see a lot of other people join, and a few people have Barcelona, Bay Area, Chicago, great, Amsterdam as well. And I wanted to put a question to the audience, and I'd love you to answer in the comments while we're talking. No wrong answers, just comments, which is, what is the most interesting or the most impactful business event you've been to? The most impactful, the one that really kind of sticks in your mind as something that really changed your job, changed the way you do something. And tell us why. So if you went to a certain event and it had it was a very impactful experience, just name the event and tell us why it was impactful. And I'm going to really enjoy reading some of the answers to this. Right, so let's get started. I will shut up now, or very shortly. I'm going to start with Sven, and I'd like to pull up these slides again so that I could illustrate one of the examples that we're going to be talking about. So a few years ago, this is an MPI event, MPI European Meetings and Events Conference 2019 in The Hague, just before the pandemic, that horrible few years where we couldn't meet in person, unfortunately. But this is a picture of one of the sessions of a sort of series of sessions that were called learning journeys. I believe there were 8 in total. And this was quite an experimental event with lots of different experiments and innovations that really kind of tried different things. And this is the one I was at. You could see me sort of at the end of the front row, listening to a man called Patrick Van Veen. And he is the author of a book called Monkey See, Monkey Do, which is about ape management at the office. And I need to explain this a little bit to put it a bit into context. So this was an experimental event, a conference for about 300 people, and it gave the attendees the option to go on 8 different learning journeys, which were spread out all over, I think all over the Netherlands almost. They weren't just in The Hague, they were in Rotterdam, they were in like all these different places. But essentially they gave people, around 50 people or so for each experience, the option to go and learn something new. And this was in the leadership section. There was 2 journeys for each sort of topic. And this was under leadership. And Patrick is famous for, he's a biologist, what do you call it? There's a name for it. Anyway, a behavioral biologist. So he analyzes the life of apes and monkeys, and he creates analogies for humans, and he compares them to the life of humans. And what was fascinating was we went to Rotterdam Zoo, where Patrick works, to hear him talk about his work. And that for me was really interesting, right? Because we went to a place where he could actually deliver. So we had this room where he could deliver his talk, which was fascinating. He talked about the different species of apes and how they manage their societies in different ways. You have very kind of leader-dominated gorilla societies, and you have matriarchal societies of bonobos and other animals. And this is him presenting, as you can see, a very fascinating presentation. But what was really interesting is, of course, we were at the zoo. So we could also go and see the animals and continue the lecture while we were watching these different species of apes and monkeys interact with each other and really see it in practice. And that was just one of the learning journeys. I know that another learning journey was about being in the middle of an orchestra and understanding that musicians in an orchestra can only hear the other musicians around them, not the whole orchestra. And they depend on the leader, the conductor, to really manage everything, to say that. So Sven, I've talked a lot. I hope I gave people a bit of a glimpse of what this was all about. I want you to take us through the process of sort of getting here. I mean, this sounds really cool, but how the heck did you come up? And I know you weren't alone, but how the heck did you come up with this idea of learning journeys and this example in particular?
Yeah, so thanks, Michael, and hi, everyone. I'm glad that you joined this one. I'm also glad that there's at least one Dutchie joining this conversation. Hi, Marjolein from Amstelveen. It's great to have you here, and just a quick one. One of the design principles for this event was that people can still talk anecdotal after a few years about this. And this was one of the reasons why I was so enthusiastic when Miguel asked me to join this conversation, because this is an event that is like 6-7 years ago now. And people are still referring to it as an experience that they still remember, and they take it hard. So yeah, how do we get to this? Because having the learning journeys was a result of proper intentional event design. So there were a dozen of steps taken before we ended up with these learning journeys. And Miguel asked me, so what was it that made it into this version of EMEC, and how did you prepare this? At first, we started with using the event design canvas, which hopefully you'll know, the EDC. And we used about 3 sessions with 40 to 50 Dutch meeting and events professionals in order to grasp their minds, in order to get them involved, in order to get the best ideas possible. Because for those of you who don't know EMEC, it's like the WEC in the States. So it's the annual educational conference for Europe from MPI. So we use their knowledge and their input and their reference and their experience from previous editions, if they joined one, in order to come up with initial ideas for this event. Based on that, we needed a couple of, let's say, kitchen table sessions with a smaller group to distill it and to bring it back to what we call the design principles for this event. And I won't go through each and every one of them, but there were like 8 most important ones. And a few actually were needed to get from that big pile of input that we got to the eventual event design. And a few of them were really easy to incorporate in the production, in the design. Some of them were more challenging, but we tried to bring it all together. Now, as an overall team, we were there to change the game, as we call it. So again, the audience, the target audience are us, meeting professionals, in whether they're buyer, the supplier, whatever. So it's a group that has seen, I wouldn't say it all, but has seen a lot, has been invited to a lot of industry sessions, has been part of whatever in the past. So we wanted to surprise them. So we said, let's change the game. And we narrowed that down to change the way you meet, change the way you learn, and change the way you experience. Because from our perspective, those are the 3 pillars that an event in any way is based upon. Again, we came to these design principles, and a few of them were relevant, I think, to explain how we ended up with the learning journeys. And the first one is that we would actually like to cater the various learning styles that people may adapt to. So sitting in a room and listening to a speaker is just one, right? So that's other people learn.
One that I think a lot of people are unfortunately very used to, right?
Yeah. So we said, well, there's more to it. And since we look at MPI as sort of a safe playground to work with various formats and try to be creative and create a safe area where we can actually try new stuff out, it brings planners to these new formats. They see if they work or if they don't, and it gives them the confidence to maybe use part of it in events they organize because they've seen it in progress. Part of it was that we wanted to be at least 50% of the program, so the overall program of a 3.5-day event, to be outside of the conference room, not necessarily the conference center, although we ended up with more than 50% outside of the conference center. And we wanted to be very interactive. So at least 50% of these sessions should be interactive. And that's based on the fact that we feel that whatever event you're organizing, whatever professionals you bring into a room, there's already a lot of knowledge and a lot of energy about the topic or topics that are relevant to them. So why don't we, so everyone is an expert in its own way. So why don't we try to captivate on that and try to stimulate people to actually share their knowledge and to bring it together and to learn from one another as well.
Were the learning journeys did they just pop up quickly? Was there a lot of distilling to get there, or was it a pretty obvious?
There was some distilling to get there, but the whole idea was to take people outside of our industry as well, to do some cross-industry innovation and to learn from other industries that might be facing the same issues or the same relevant topics that we are facing and how they deal with that. From that perspective, we took them out, for instance, brought you to the zoo. And we also tried for each of this session to, let's say, translate what it is that people learned or listened to in that specific journey and bring that back to their daily event life, so to say. So how can they actually use their knowledge and use that specific, I would say, interaction or input in their daily life once they return back in their offices. So yeah, that's what we did, and that's where the learning journeys ended up with. So these were all non-directly related to the event industry, I would say. Going to a zoo and learn on ape management and how that reflects on leadership and how a group responds to one another what the dynamics is. We translated that back to your group in this specific case, Miguel. Same for the other sessions that we did. So that's how we came across to the learning journeys. Not regular, let's say, excursions. It's not a venue. It's not a site inspection. It's not a venue showing the ballroom. It was less important where we actually went with the group. It has to match the topic that we want to address.
Yeah, I thought they were very clever. And I wanted to mention a few things that you pointed out. One is that this was all organized by volunteers. There wasn't a kind of professional designer working on it. I mean, there were a lot of professional designers, but they're all volunteering their time. Yep. And I think this idea that you're planning for event professionals is very challenging, right? Because these people have seen a lot of different things. So you want to try to surprise them.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think you made an excellent point as well. These sessions were not directly about event planning or event management. They were topics that were sort of related and relatable, but not a direct kind of instructional session or anything like that.
Yeah. So
super interesting.
That we did in the other days
in the ballroom.
Day and a half in the ballroom, there were these topics that were really, really one-on-one relevant to the meeting and events industry. But it was a combination of those two. Yeah.
Cool. So I wanted to bring out a couple of, there's only a couple of people that have mentioned events. If there's any others that want to mention an event they've been at, I would love to see that in the comments. But Kevin Larstone says a Deloitte partner meeting I produced in 2023. So talking a little bit about an event he produced. Almost all ideas highly relevant to the audience. Big ideas, immersive production design, great on-stage discussion, out-of-room experiences were an extension of the ideas discussed during the meeting. Thank you, Kevin. Would love to see this as a case study if you have something available. And I also see Xenia, who was involved in the Ichi Congress in Abu Dhabi last year. She says the sessions, campfires, lounges, breaks, and lunch, all in one space, but each had its own built area. So almost like a hybrid conference trade show, if I remember well, seeing the photos of the Ichi Congress last year. Great. Thank you for sharing those examples. Would love to see more in the comments. But Liz, over to you. You haven't said anything yet. You've just said hello. So I really want to hear a little bit from you. And I thought of you for this session because of your work on the spontaneous think tanks. And I'd love to bring these slides back on the screen so we could have some visual references here. But tell us a little bit about spontaneous think tanks.
So the genesis of these are the unconference concept, which I got introduced to in probably the early 2000s. Adrian Segar had been doing some participant-driven meeting things at one of the associations, annual conferences that I went to. And I just thought it was really cool that there was this session that wasn't prescribed by a call for papers or the board of directors or the company where it's saying you need to listen to these things. It was asking the people in the room, what is important to you? And the way, I mean, unconferences can be run many different ways. A lot of the ones that I had been to were where the participant would suggest what they would like to talk about, and they would go put it up on a wall, and other participants would vote which ones they want to hear from, and then the agenda gets crafted from those. So it's, you kind of come in knowing you're going to present, and you may even have a presentation ready, and then those get voted up. And then when I was at Dell, we had played around with some of those unconferencey ideas, but in a safe corporate setting where it wasn't a free-for-all. It was planned subject matter experts and even paid speakers, and they had 3 topics they were ready to speak on. They would share what they were, and participants would vote which one it became, and then they would speak about it. So I thought that was really cool. What we did when we created our first unconference feeling event was just to go totally open and ask everybody, what do you want to solve? What's the problem that you're bringing with you today that you would like to solve? And then specifically saying pink sticky notes are for your expertise. So all the other sticky notes are for all your problems. The pink ones are for something that you are an expert in. And then we started matching those up, saying, well, wow, it looks like there's a grouping of these challenges and this person has solved that problem. So that first time we did it was in 2017. And the people told us, oh my gosh, this was the most rewarding experience because I actually got to talk about something that I was concerned with. And the coolest part was the introverts in the room telling us, I never would have volunteered to stand on stage and give a presentation, but I ended up leading a session. It was just 10 people. I shared what I knew, and it was a very comfortable environment. So since 2017, we've evolved this. We kind of figured out what the spontaneous think tank format is, the steps to do it so that it's repeatable. We've done them hundreds of times for our own events and for, client events and conferences, in trade show booths. Here's one where, just to show, you don't even need walls. This was at an event we did in Tuscany, and those were fabric walls. So as long as it's something that the sticky notes can stick to. Pro tip, buy the Post-it brand. The other ones fall right off the wall. Here's a picture of us doing this on a boat. So you can even be in motion and do these things. As long as your venue will let you put sticky notes on a window or a wall, it's so easy. You need a stack of sticky notes, some Sharpie markers, and somebody to kind of corral the energy. And then once people put their challenges, we call it the wall of woes. They put all their challenges up. We then ask them, if you see a challenge, add your name to it so we can start matching up who can lead these sessions. And then the whole conference is just built peer-to-peer. Looks like this is a challenge. Bob has solved it. Bob, would you mind leading a conversation? So that's kind of the way that we put them together now.
Okay, and I'm just showing you a few pictures of what
happens.
Happens
so just formatting, right? Just like you said, if you have to be this, so this conversation today is about thinking out of the box and in the box. Here's an example of a corporate event. You're going to be in a ballroom sometimes. That's okay. You have to be at 72-inch rounds sometimes. That's okay. These are these moments where, okay, we do have to put this thing in a box. What can we do to get it a little bit outside? And so instead of just saying it's going to be a roundtable, here is the topic, let's spend 10 minutes crowdsourcing the roundtable topics, and then plug in our subject matter experts or our peer in the room who has solved it. And it's as simple as you can just do a circle of chairs to remove the barriers between people, or you can put them in, a room where you have to have the tables.
Or if you're on a boat, you put
another one on a boat.
Together.
So like modality, you can be anywhere. And of course, virtually, using a mural board or a Miro board and gathering people together to do the same kind of concept. But it's all about the participant-driven conversation.
Okay, I realize both of the examples that we're talking about involve a lot of sticky notes, so we should have really got a sponsorship from Post-it for this.
Here's the thing, 3M will never sponsor us. We spend too much money with them.
Yeah, you're easy clients. So just to take us back through the system, so people show up at an event. They can look like any of these events. You ask them, hey, what's on your mind? What are your biggest challenges, your biggest concerns, right? And then you ask them to write them in these large sticky notes, assuming this is for visibility so everybody can read, and hopefully they have decent handwriting, right?
Yep.
And then they put them on the wall, and then you ask people to say, hey, I've actually solved that, so I will add my name to that problem as, hey, I could potentially lead a session on this, right?
Yep. So when we give the overview, that's what we tell them. If you're adding your name to it, then we may tap you and ask you to share how you solved that problem. And then once we put them together in those peer conversations, it's, a circle of people, 10 to 15 people is solid. If 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but the first 10 minutes or so is that person who we've anointed as the facilitator of the conversation, sharing how they solved the problem. And then they bring it into conversation and everybody else can give their advice, ask their questions, and it becomes this really great conversation. You don't have to be a trained facilitator. Everyone understands that this whole thing is one big giant experiment, and it's a very free flowing and freeing feeling for people to get to share.
Okay, interesting. And then people sit down. Yeah, I guess they could just kind of run their own session. So super interesting. Why is this better in terms of the spontaneous think tanks? Because I think we could say, hey, it's more engaging, people are talking, but they could also go off topic, and they also, all sorts of things can happen, right? I think from a skeptic's perspective, why is this better than a traditional session that's, let's say it's well-researched and on topic and, along the lines with what everybody's expecting?
So we kind of shape our events with something that we call the 5 C's to connections. It's care, collaborate, co-create, converse, and connect. And I feel like when most people create an event, they say, we're going to create an event for connection. People want to connect, let's do it. But you can't just jump to the connection part. You have to kind of lead them there. So the first one is care. You, as the organizer, have to care that the people that are coming are going to get something from this event. And you have to kind of think about their experience, extroverts, introverts, and how they're going to engage and interact with what you've designed for them. And the next one is to collaborate. So getting them together and giving them a job, something that they can do side by side. So asking them, write a challenge that you're trying to solve on a sticky note, has them all at highboy tables, writing these challenges challenges, putting them on the walls, seeing what other people are doing, adding their names. One reminds them of another. Oh, me too. And they add another, putting check marks on the ones. So you see that collaboration happen. You see the extroverts start, the introverts start to move forward over time. The next one is co-create. So now we've said there's all these challenges. Who has solved it? And this is going to start to co-create what the conversations need to be, because there are experts in the room that can really address them right now, which takes you into converse. So the conversation is what this is all about. Instead of just sitting and giving, if your whole event could have been watched on YouTube, why did I fly all the way there to sit in a dark room and check my email? So the conversation is the core part of it, and that is what drives connection. So people connect over shared challenges, shared solutions, and true conversation. So why is this better? Because it emotionally engages people all the way through, instead of just putting them in one dark room and expecting that they're going to create connections and that they're going to leave with motivation.
Interesting. Sven, I want to come back to you a little bit. I know one of the challenges that I've had in the past with these types of sessions, and I'm going to put spontaneous think tanks and learning journeys into one box, if you will. I actually sort of kind of sold this concept as spontaneous think tanks being in the box and learning journeys being outside of the box. But as we saw, spontaneous think tanks can also be very much outside the box. One of the challenges that I've definitely experienced in the past is marketing these events. Right? Because I know that we're a believer in these events. We like the interactivity, but I feel like there is either a fear or a real challenge when it comes to sort of promoting these events, because organizations expect a big name speaker. They expect a sort of known format. And if you're saying, hey, you're not going to be at a ballroom, you're going to go on this journey, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to be so cool. How do you frame that in a way where the average attendee can still go to their boss and say, hey, I need some budget to go to this conference. I'm going to go to the zoo as part of the conference.
Well, I think there are multiple answers possible to this question. One is that as a result of EMAG 19, which was different from 18, 17, and all the previous editions, EMAG 20 was way more popular. So it's also, the proof is in the pudding, right? So if you did this once, people will talk about it, and they will talk about it to their peers, to their colleagues, to whatever. And if you've done your job right, it's likely to grow over years. So give it some slack in order to evolve. The other thing is, in terms of marketing, what is at the core of this event? So an event itself doesn't have an objective, right? Its stakeholders have objectives. So what are their objectives?
So the people attending, the people putting on the event, the sponsors, all those different people,
all those different groups,
things that they want.
Have their own objectives, correct? So it really depends on who do you feel is most relevant or most important. Pick 2, 3, or 4, and try to facilitate to their needs as much as possible. You don't have to communicate your full program. You don't have to mention at what time the coffee is being served. Just make event promises, if you like, and tell them what it is that they're actually buying or what they're getting if they're attending this event. So for instance, for this particular example for EMEC, we said after the event, you will have met at least 7 new people from our network, from our industry, that will pick up the phone if you call them. That was our promise. In other words, this wasn't in the change the way you meet. We had to facilitate the networking in such a way that there were deeper connections made, and people will actually feel comfortable in reaching out after the event and doing proper follow-up. Not only suppliers to buyers trying to get in some more business, but also the other way around. So it depends on how you market your events, and if you keep on doing it how you've done it over the past. I mean, I've heard, Liz, you did Dell forums as well, so we did 2 in the past 2 editions, and they included, so that's a Dell forum in the Benelux, and they've included some more, let's say, experimental event design for part of it, because it's really it's stuck to a certain US based grid, and all the events have to look the same. And well, you might know more about this than I do, Liz, but so there was little room to navigate away from that. So we weren't allowed to touch the basis of the event, but we were allowed to add something to it. And those elements that we added to it, those were the elements that people took the pictures of. Those were the elements they made little movie clips on and posted online. That was the part that they, besides the content and all the things that Dell is is dealing with in terms of, I don't know, clouds and AI and whatever it is, the elements where they were truly connecting to others and where they were discussing topics that were relevant to them, whether it was based on a keynote or whether it was based on an example that we gave them more input that they have to play in some sort of experimental game, that was the added value for them. That's where the magic happened. So I feel if you can start small, in this case for the Dell event, for example, if you start small by adding a few elements to that, and then the year after, last year, it was already a bigger chunk because they understood, those who needed to be convinced internally and also Europe-wide, understood, hey, this might be something that we're on right now. So it needs some time to grow. It needs some time to prove itself. It needs some time to develop and take out what doesn't work and improve what did work really well, because all the audiences are a bit different from that perspective.
And I think Sven is spot on. So to Kevin's question here, like, how do you manage this with C-suites? You don't take over the entire event and say, hey, it's an unconference, come here, we don't know what we're talking about. You have your keynote speaker, you have your executive-led roundtables, and then you have this 90-minute session that is going to be spontaneously curated roundtable discussions. And maybe you don't pull the facilitator straight from the audience in a completely organic fashion. You have subject matter experts from the company plotted out to be the facilitators, but the topics can be fluid based on the crowdsourcing. So again, inside the box and outside the box. Having grown up in corporate, I know that there's only so far you can push the boundary sometimes. And so you just have to know where those walls are. And if you can expand them just a little, you don't have to live in 2035, but let's maybe live in 2025 and not 2019.
Yeah. Great questions. I also had a question. There was a question here from Cynthia. She asked, so how do you take ideas from one conference and apply them to the next, or are they applied real time to the same conference? You kind of answered that in the text already here, Liz, but Cynthia, let us know if we kind of addressed that. If we haven't, then we're happy to kind of check that again. But
yeah, to Cynthia's question, so you've got an entire wall of sticky notes of people telling you their problems. How do you use them event to event to event? Well, if it's in the same industry, if I'm doing this just for event professionals, then we can take that content and create an editorial calendar for other offline content. We can also help drive, maybe there is a keynote speaking moment where you can say, this is a big thing that our community wants to talk about. Let's add that in. So that's one. And then at the end, if it is for the same industry, creating an insight report out of all of them, magical. I did that last year at the end of the year. We took all the think tanks we had done for Club Ichi, and I did this beautiful little, I used AI, and it's called Napkin, and had it draw some cool little designs from the insights that we got. Like, it was awesome.
Great stuff. I wanted to just go back to the spontaneous think tanks, because I know there's one quite critical time, which is when you're taking all the cool ideas that you have on the wall, and then you have to organize them and put them into a grid and sort of make those tough choices of like, what are we actually going to do sessions on, and what is just going to there's not enough people interested in this topic. And that takes some time, right? There isn't really a quick way to do that. You have to have a few hours of sort of brains coming together and organizing.
I mean, when you've done it enough, you don't need a few hours. Or when it's a larger group, when it's 500 people, then yeah, you need a little bit more time to pull it together. But when it's a micro event, you've got about 100 people, you can pull it together in about an hour. The patterns emerge really easily. You can start to see the same things people are talking about, and you just group them together. But you know, now that AI and OCR work really well, you can use your phone, take pictures of the wall, load them into ChatGPT, and tell it to give you the trends that it's seeing, top 5 trends that it's catching. It's not going to be 100% accurate, like if a person were actually going through them, but to give you kind of a thumb in the wind, if these are the patterns that are coming up, if you have to go really fast, it works great. You can only load like 5 pictures at a time. So you just take a couple pictures of the wall, have it in there. It does a decent enough job if you need to get somewhere.
A custom GPT being made by somebody in the background right now going, okay, we're going to do a spontaneous think tank GPT, and that's going to be ready for the next session. So I think that's a great idea. So going back to the learning journeys, one of the things that I have in my mind is that they're quite expensive, right? And they require a lot of thought, right? Because you researched interesting speakers, you created these settings. I mean, the orchestra one, I wasn't at the orchestra one, but I imagine hiring an orchestra and then having a maestro that can explain the dynamics of being a maestro and the connections to leadership and business, that's not an easy task. That's not a simple session, right? So these things are quite in depth. Like, there was a lot of thought put behind this. And if I'm going to the C-suite and saying, hey, I need $100,000 to hire an orchestra and a conductor that can explain all this, let's stick with this a little bit. How do you have that conversation? What are you going to say to this person? It's like, no, they don't want to hear you on stage for 3 hours talking about, the objectives for next year. They actually want to have an experience, and here's why. What do you say that? What do you put in your back pocket to prepare for that conversation?
It's an interesting conversation, and it is a discussion, and it's a little, Liz, you mentioned it's a dance, and it is a dance. The thing is, so I can go into the budget side, or I can go into the discussion side, whatever way you prefer. In terms of budget, EMEC is done by volunteers, and we have 0 starting budgets, 0, nothing. So everything is either sponsored in kind or a little bit in cash to cover basic costs, out-of-pocket costs, and all the rest is sponsored in kind, including in this particular case the orchestra and the conductor, which we have a great deal with the city of Leiden, who was really happy to have this group over, etc., etc. So
organizing. So there's an interesting nugget there, right? Because you were in The Hague, but there's a lot of cities close by. As long as you had the transportation facilities, you were able to, let's say, partner, sponsor. Cities wanted to sponsor to bring the group into the city, small groups into the city, to have really interesting experiences.
Yeah. So if I don't know if any of you is planning or already did it in the past to organize an MPI event, it's really about making great deals with your partners, because you don't have any budget. So it's a very
any event really, but yeah, if you're starting with a 0
money
budget,
is as commercial as spending money the right way. So in our case, I mean, EMEC in general, we did, I think, 18 different venues were included in a 3.5-day program.
I could see a few planners' minds being blown, like 18 venues. Yeah. What are you thinking?
Yeah, and I'm not every attendee was visiting 18 venues. So, for instance, these learning journeys, they included 2 venues each. Or anyway, now going into
let's talk about that conversation. Yeah, the C-suite conversation.
Yeah. So like, that's
how do you prepare for that?
It starts with the very, I mean, in this particular, so if I take EMEC, we created our own event. We created our own boundaries, so to say. We created our own strategy. We created our own input, output, everything. So we were our own client for that matter. But in general, if we have these discussions with either corporate or associations, it really comes down on asking why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? What is it that we're trying to achieve? What do we want our delegates, attendees, whatever you call them, to take home? What do you want them to talk about? It's not about your ego. You're part of the process, maybe part of the problem. You're part of the process that you're in. And as an example, I had a conversation yesterday with a client who is organizing in the Netherlands. It's quite popular to organize festival-like events. So it's all short workshop style, 45 minutes, and people just float around and they decide whether they join a session or not. Highly interactive. If they don't join a session, it's sort of a beehive, so people drop in, right? So I had a conversation with the board in this particular case yesterday, and they said, we came across this one speaker and he is brilliant. And the whole board was saying, yes, he's really brilliant, all C-level. And then we said, okay, but you're organizing this festival for healthcare employees, not C-level, those who are actually dealing with patients on a day-by-day basis. And we're organizing this whole festival setup with them in the back of our mind. Now, the speaker that you came across might be very relevant and very popular for you guys, C-level guys. But we decided this event is not about C-level. It's not about you. It's not about the board. It's not about local government. It's about them. So they planned to do a 45-minute keynote speaker, this particular person, on stage for everyone to attend. And we really had to talk through with them. Look, it doesn't make sense. So put aside your own ego, put aside your own diary or whatever. The reason why you're planning this is A, B, and C. We agreed on that. And that was like, I would say, the building stone, the one that we always come back to with everything that we create for this specific event. It has to add to that one objective. Now, adding this speaker doesn't add that. It adds something to your diary, to your planning. Don't do it. Organize a separate event for you guys. So it's continuously the why question. And even if you get an answer, ask why again. And if you get an answer, ask why again, to get to the bottom of it and start designing from that, because that's the base, I would say. And everything else, I mean, it can be fantastic to have jumping clowns or balloons or whatever if it adds something to it. If not, don't do it. we all realize that there are clients that come, and then all of a sudden there's this person that wasn't involved in the initial planning, and he or she hears about it and he said, oh, that might be relevant. I have a nephew and he once told me about, we're not going to do it because we set this in stone. This is our objective. Might be a good idea, not for this edition. So I think it's really intentional designing with proper objectives and design principles, and stick to that. And everything that adds to it is very welcome to see if we can include it. I mean, EMSC wasn't designed as such. Stuff was added to it along the way. A lot of stuff was thrown at us that we said, that's a brilliant idea, but it doesn't match our intentions for this event, so we're not going to do it. And we created different events for that after EMSC. So it's a continuous conversation, I would say.
And I just want to say, like, the idea and the design, you don't need 18 venues to do something really cool and amazing and behind the scenes. So don't let that blow your mind. When you have an incredible team of professionals that know what they're doing, you can do these logistically complicated things. But we did an event at the Bahamas, at the Atlantis in the Bahamas, and you can still do this behind the scenes. We got to do behind the scenes of the aquarium, and we got to talk about complex ecosystems that make things work together. So tying it to the content, getting people in there, talking to the person that's leading that. We did one about, it was kind of a conflict management, how do you deal with things, and we had the guys that run the bomb dog squad at the Atlantis doing like drug catching demonstrations and bomb dog takedowns, and like they were all taking pictures of each other, of the guys that worked there, because they're like, well, normally when we see guests we're taking them down, so like it was really fun for them to get to show off what they did. And so the emotional engagement of that, of like them being excited that we're excited about what they're doing, and these moments, it all happened on property.
So let's dig into that a little bit, Liz, because I've seen you talk about these behind the scenes activities that you're able to do, and I think they're great. How do you get to there, right? Like, how do you, I mean, obviously you can have the idea, hey, we'd love to understand how your catering department works. I mean, I remember having a behind the scenes tour of the Venetian in Las Vegas, and they have this thing where it's the laundry room for the staff, and they have something like 7,000 uniforms being washed every day and this whole machine going on. I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. I think every planner would love to see this. But it's not on the menu per se, right? When you book a venue, you book the ballroom, you book the tables, you book the food. You don't book behind the scenes tours. Is this
which
just
is a real shame?
Asking? Exactly, it's a real shame. But could you give us a little insight into how you get there? How do you have these conversations, and how do you navigate the politics around being able to do behind the scenes activities?
All it takes is asking. All I can do is say no. And then there's an opportunity to bring something into the room. So if it's can I take a VIP group and have them meet with the chef and have them do a cooking class in the actual kitchen, and they're going to make the dessert that gets fed to the 50-person roundtable group. And if they say, no, there's too many health code violations, we can't do that. And, oh, okay, well, is it an opportunity to bring in something to the ballroom so the cooking class can happen there and the chefs can still lead something? Oh yeah, we can totally do that. And maybe they don't make something where they cook. Maybe it's like sushi where they're rolling something. But it's just starting the conversation. Ask for the ridiculous. I have a dream for a hotel to let me into their laundry facility and run a big sheet through the laundry sheet ironer thing. I would really like to try that. If a hotel will let me do that, give me a shout. So it's just coming up with a ridiculous idea, asking if you can do it, and someday someone will say yes.
Love it. Let's go back to the idea of getting permission, because I think this is something that hopefully the people watching, and let me know if this is not the case, but I think a lot of people like these ideas, or I think they find them interesting, but I could see a lot of pushback, right? And kind of getting to the right moment where you're able to do this. And I think, Sven, we talked a little bit about this idea of small changes, right? But let's say you're working on a medical congress where there's thousands of doctors, and they're very used to a very rigid format, right? There is speakers on stage, there's session after session. What are like small things that you can do to start to bring in the 5 C's, to start to connect people, to start to add a little more interaction? And I'll let either of you take this, or both of you really, but I just wanted to get some small tips, right? Not big changes as if we're going to blow up this whole format, but what are small things that you think can actually make a big difference that are maybe easier to flow into the planning of an event rather than kind of complete radical changes?
Well, Nicole and I like to start with a game we call, it would be really fun. And so it's just think really big. And what would be really fun is if the CEO was wearing a sequin suit and jumped out of an airplane and had like the parachute was branded and all the things. Yeah. Probably not going to happen. Okay, well, what if it's the flying Elvises? What if there's something that happens outside that makes the people go outside? What if it's a drone show? What's the thing? And so just start with the ridiculous and then hone it down into something. Again, like when you think outside the most insanely ridiculous box, you can work your way back into it. We know there are realities of budget and corporate and venue and location and weather and all the things, right? So it's just start thinking big. Don't start thinking small.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. We don't have that game, but we have the what if. So it's pretty much similar. So if you start fantasizing on what it could actually become, or then narrow it down with whatever reality kicks in. But also your question is actually quite relevant as well, Miguel, when it comes to doctors. So when you look at not the corporate but the more association conferences, I ran one in Milan before summer, and we did the event design canvas. We did strategy sessions. We worked our way from it's a biannual conference. We worked our way from Hamburg in 23 to the edition in Milan right now. What I find fascinating is that the let's say the low-hanging fruit for us, when used to playing around more on the corporate side, is there are so many small things that you can add to the association conferences that for them are like a huge eye-opener. For instance, having an MC on stage rather than the president doing all the announcements. We did it in Milan. For me, I didn't even think about how special that was for them. But for them, it made a huge difference. The president was far more relaxed because he only had to focus on doing his own little 10-minute speech and introducing some award winners, not having to deal with any other politics on stage, etc. But also playing around with formats. And those are not rocket science either, but including, so these medical conference or the doctors, or in my case, the microbiologists, they are very much used to sitting in a room and listening for 2 hours, taking notes on their laptop, and they're absorbing the content. That's what they're there for. And they can do that all day, every day. It's really, I find it fascinating. Whereas our minds drift off every now and then, and we check our cell phones, do the email, whatever it is in the ballroom. Playing around with formats. So yes, we still program these highly international keynote speakers with highly important topics within their level of expertise. But we also included debates, for instance, which was fascinating to see because in the academic world, let's say the more senior professors, those are the ones to go to. But the more junior, and bear in mind, these are the 30 to 40 years old, which are the junior ones. They are not used to speaking out because the seniors are there as well. And what would they feel about by facilitating this conversation, by facilitating these discussions? All of a sudden, it was like a safe space to speak out, especially when you come up with topics or statements, and people are not choosing whether they in favor or against it, but they are divided into two groups, and they just have to. Your group is in favor, your group is against it. They just have to come up with reasons why they would be either in favor or against it. It's a safe space for them to speak out and to start a conversation also after the debate took place. So we programmed 6 debates, 2 each day, 3 days, and they were highly popular. So it's really about playing around with formats that in the corporate world we're very used to. They're not special, they're not outside of the box, whatever, but for the association meetings, they are apparently.
Yeah, and isn't it funny, Sven, how sometimes we don't think about some of those simple changes as being revolutionary? We're like, well, what if you just did the session outside? And they're like, what? That would be crazy, So there's these moments where we can push, and then what is outside for them is a little bit outside the box. Like, our wild and crazy idea of, well, let's hold the event on a chartered yacht. And what if all the conference sessions were held on inflatable unicorns? You can't do that at every event, but maybe you could hold the roundtable session in the garden outside the venue. Maybe you could get people out doing something. Walk and talk, maybe the session is them walking.
Yes. We'll show a few slides that I think we will have about those in a second. But before we get there, I wanted to go in a couple of different directions. One thing you mentioned, Sven, is the phone, right? People looking at their phones. And I always see this as a sign of like, okay, this isn't working. Whatever's happening is not working. Maybe people are taking notes on their phones, but there's a very high probability that if somebody's holding up their phone, they're checking their emails, they're on Instagram, they're doing something else, right? And my kind of thing that I like to do in sessions to see how they're working is sit in the back of the room where I can actually see people's phones and kind of count how many people are on their phones. And unfortunately, in most sessions, it's like half of the audience, right? And that's always a terrible sign. But what can we do about that, right? Because I think, there's a everybody's got a phone or a laptop or a tablet. Some people have all three. Do we ban them? Do we fight them? Or is it just a sort of litmus test for if an event is working, people won't be on their phones? Liz, I know you have strong opinions.
That's why.
Well, so for the most part, what we do is design things that people are going to have to talk to each other, because there's a whole lot more of that kind of personal consciousness of when you're in a conversation, you're not looking at your phone. You are putting it down and you're engaged. But when you're in a room and you do have a keynote or a panel or something, like, let's be honest, the whole goldfish attention span thing is real. I cannot just sit and listen to that. I'm so used to listening to podcasts while I walk the dog or fold the laundry, or have a YouTube going while I'm doing emails or something like that. So to actually sit with rapt attention, literally the only time I can do it is when I'm at a movie theater. So what's happening on the stage is not as completely engrossing and as engaging as a movie. I'm probably going to be scrolling or doing other things. It doesn't actually mean that I'm not listening. It actually means that I just can't do that one thing anymore. So I don't know that it is something to worry about or something to be negative about. I think that the speakers need to understand that there are two causes. One is they're just really boring. And the other is that people are listening passively to what they're doing, and that they need to focus on the content because it's probably being captured on film anyway, and people can go back and listen to it as a podcast or listen to it on demand later, and kind of embrace the idea that they are the talent and they are performing. So I think figuring out that balance is okay. We're not going to take people's phones away. We talked, in our pre-show about those events where you put it in a pouch and you put it away, and it totally changes the vibe, and it is really cool and amazing. Is it necessary, or should we just kind of create content and engagement around it?
Interesting. Sven, any thoughts?
No, I'm with Liz on this. And also I think it was Sina who said, give them enough break time so they can check emails if necessary. So I don't believe in banning, because if people feel it's more important to check email on their phone than it is to listen, if they are listening, Liz, it's up to them, really. It's their time. It's their time, basically. Not only their money. It's basically their time that they're using whatever way they feel wisely. We did organize an event in the past where we specifically, it was also an event. It was a national event for the meeting and event industry here in the Netherlands, where we specifically asked people to put their phone in a locker when they entered. And the conversation and the interaction that starts around that question is fascinating. So a lot of them are like, why? Others are, oh yeah, sure. There's a small group that says, well, I'm waiting for my kid to call me around 2, so I'd rather keep it with me, whatever reason they give. But only that conversation is already very, very interesting to see. And if you do that, and if you actually take out their phone or tablet or laptop or whatever, and you facilitate the networking, you facilitate the meeting, you facilitate the interaction, they don't care that they don't have their phone for 2 hours. Really, they don't. If you put them in a ballroom with a boring speaker for 120 minutes, they do care, because then they get bored.
They find ways.
And here in Texas, it's now the official law that students can't have their phones on or with them from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or whatever their school is in session. And, the teachers are reporting that the students are more engaged, that they are interactive. They don't feel as depressed because they're not scrolling what all of the other kids are putting up there. So there's something real about it. But what if we had some ridiculous fun of gamifying it? Remember those times when you would go to dinner with your friends and everybody puts their phone in a basket in the middle and the first one to reach for it has to pay the bill? What if in your session room you have that, and there's prizes or punishments, hilarious punishments for it, and just make it part of it?
Really interesting, because as soon as I asked that question, the comments blew up, and we have very different views here. Nobody is really fighting for putting phones in a bag. A few people have shared that experience of putting phones away as an option. Some people are saying, use the app to connect guests with each other. Monique Johnson says she uses the app quite well. There's other people saying, the app is important for, like Ruud Jensen, hi Ruud, is talking about Wordly and Snapsight. So kind of functionality within the app that helps with sessions. So, but it's really an interesting debate because it's I think the important thing is I think that we acknowledge it, right? When we ask that question and we make a decision, right? Because it's more like if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't deal with it, it's not going to go away. And I think it's fairly interesting. One last question, and I think related to this is, what's the litmus test of good event design? Is it this idea of people not looking at their phones? Like we talked about spontaneous think tanks, and we talked about the learning journeys as two inside and outside the box examples. But are there like common results that you think can be measured that we can say, hey, this was a success because of X? And I'll open it up to either one of you.
So I think I view engagement as, let's figure out what the heck we're trying to do and how are we measuring engagement. And I break it into three: cognitive, behavioral, and emotional engagement. What's the purpose of the event? If it's a sales kickoff and people are there to learn the new products and get motivated about selling them and understand it, that's cognitive engagement. We want them to get it. And so we can design the event around that. Are there quizzes? Or there, what needs to happen? If it's behavioral engagement and you want people to like allow you to scan their badge, or things like this are happening where you need people to go do something, then again, that's driving pipeline and revenue by having them engage in certain conversations. That's behavioral. Emotional, do you want brand loyalty? Do you want them to feel like they absolutely love your brand and want to tell everybody about it? Do you want them to connect and have more networking opportunities? Then you're going to design for that emotional engagement and you can measure it accordingly. So those are my thoughts. It's not just like, oh, it was an engaging event. You kind of have to figure it out and then measure what you're trying to achieve.
Yes, because engagement doesn't necessarily mean results, right? If there was a dancing monkey that was very entertaining, that could be engaging, but it doesn't mean the event's objectives were met, right? Sven, exactly. I know we talk a lot about kind of stakeholder objectives. I prefer to stay away from the more technical terms to make sure that we take everybody on the ride, but what's your litmus test when you're kind of designing events?
That's actually one of the questions that we ask first when we start conversations with whatever client is, what do you want this event to change in terms of behavior, whatever behavior it is in that case. So what has to change by this event? Again, an event is just a tool, right? It's not a goal on its own. So I feel that if you meet that, that's a first. If delegates, attendees are wild about it, that's a very, very good measurement as well. And I would say the return on time should be relevant to all. So it's not return on investment from a organizer's or event owner's perspective. It's the return on time for the attendees. Was it worth that they spend their time with you? Was it worth that they spend their time not with their family, not with their dog, not behind their desk? Was it worth for them to come over and spend their energy, their time, their resources, whatever it is, with you for that sole purpose? If you bring together 100 doctors in a room for 8 hours, that's 800 hours of doctor time not given to the patients. It's given to you as an organizer or an owner. So be very conscious about that and make sure that once they leave, they felt it was relevant, it was worth their time. I think that's one of the measurements that we always try to take along in the journey and the discussions that we have on C-level as well.
Okay, well, we're coming up on time, so I'm going to have to say let's wrap up there. Liz, Sven, thank you so much for this conversation. I knew it would go quickly. Liz, I think you mentioned unicorns and a boat. This is how you end your spontaneous think tanks, at least in some of your events. I know we also had a number of slides here, and I know you're posting some of these on LinkedIn, which are just fascinating ideas. Could you maybe take us to one or two of these just so we know what's going on, and maybe people follow you on LinkedIn, they will see more of these ideas pop up?
Yeah, the idea around, though, what would be really fun is also my what if. So what if you did something a little bit different? And again, you don't have to live in 2035 and be in the future and doing things that are ridiculously outside of the box, but what if you could take something a little bit one step further? So the one kind of in the middle with the guy doing screen printing, instead of just handing out t-shirts at your event, what if you had on-site screen printing where people could choose their design, and then it dries, it becomes this kind of moment, and then they take it with them. The one right next to it was a friend of ours, instead of building a trade show booth, built an art exhibit of a moon lander out of cardboard, so completely biodegradable and recyclable. And it was the booth. It tied to their message. People could come in and see it, and it was really incredible. The one next to that is the bathrooms. What if you branded the bathrooms, sold it to a sponsor? My favorite story was of a pharmaceutical event with a bladder control medicine, and they sponsored all the bathrooms. Freaking brilliant. I'm dying for someone who runs a cybersecurity event to have like the cybersecurity people brand the bathroom with a little guy looking over the stall that says, value your privacy, visit us in booth 1312 or whatever, like that would be amazing.
Ooh.
So what are these little things that are just that one step further? Instead of your keynote, we talked about different formats. What if it's a hot ones challenge where your CEO is interviewing the customer and they're eating hotter and hotter chicken wings as they answer the questions? How do you just push it one little step further to drive that moment of connection?
Great place. And thank you, Liz, so much for these ideas. And thank you, Sven, again. Just want to mention again the content that we do, the insights reports. This was the event you've been watching today. We have the Skift Meetings Forum coming up on the 15th of September in New York City, the AI Innovation Lab on the 6th of October at IMEX America. Do join us for that. All the information is on our website. And the one place where you really connect with everything that we do at Skift Meetings is our newsletter. So highly encourage you to be part of that. Sign up for the newsletter. We'll also put a link here in the comments with a link directly to sign up for the newsletter. And the last thing I want to mention is if you were engaged, we will be sending out a survey link with the survey for today. So please do take a few moments just to let us, it's a very short survey. It really helps us improve our content. So please reply to that and give us a few of your thumbs up, thumbs down. Let us know how you're doing so we can create better and better content going forward. Thank you, everybody who joined us. Sven, Liz, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And I hope to see you at on Skift Meetings and around town. I'm sure we'll see each other again very soon. All the best, everybody.
Yay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.